It is 1944, London. A man is upstairs in a darkened Victorian mansion, searching the walls for hidden jewels. He knows the gaslights will flicker every time he lights his lamp up there. So before he went up, he did something far more precise than hiding the evidence. He convinced his wife she was losing her mind. That film, Gaslight, gave a name to one of the oldest weapons in human history. A weapon so effective it was later studied, classified, and quietly deployed not just by abusers and narcissists, but by governments, by institutions, and more recently, by systems we interact with every day without realizing what is happening. This is not a story about toxic relationships. The data tells a completely different story. Most people encounter the word gaslighting and immediately picture a controlling partner, someone who says, "That never happened, you imagined it, you're too sensitive." That picture is accurate, but it is incomplete. What no one fully explains is the architecture underneath that behavior. Why it works with such precision, who is most vulnerable, and why a term that appeared in a 1938 stage play spent 60 years in near total obscurity before suddenly becoming Merriam-Webster's Word of the Year in 2022. The New York Times used the word exactly 9 times in the 20 years following 1995. Then, in the 2010s, it erupted into everyday language. That does not happen by coincidence. Robin Stern, co-founder of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, spent years mapping how the process operates. She identified something most discussions miss entirely. Gaslighting is not one single behavior. It is 3 distinct operating systems, what she called the glamour type, the good guy type, and the intimidator. Each targets the same thing. Each gets there through a different door. The glamour gaslighter makes you feel special while quietly engineering your reality. The good guy gaslighter appears supportive, even kind, but somehow every conversation with them leaves you feeling worse. The intimidator is the one most people recognize: direct, hostile, and relentlessly critical. But here is what all 3 share. They are not random, they are learned. And according to a 2024 study out of the University of Palermo, gaslighters, all 3 types, share specific, measurable personality traits. The data points to something nobody in the mainstream discussion is saying clearly. Picture the scene. It is not a domestic argument. It is East Germany, 1975. The Stasi, the state security apparatus, has a problem. Dissidents, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens who simply ask the wrong questions. Too many to imprison without international condemnation. So they develop something else, a program. They call it Zersetzung, decomposition. Agents enter a target's apartment while they are away. They move objects slightly. They rearrange books. They leave a window open that was definitely closed. They intercept mail, read it, reseal it. They spread quiet rumors among the target's friends that the person is unstable, paranoid, unreliable. No violence, no arrest, just the steady, deliberate erosion of a person's trust in their own perception. What the official history rarely emphasizes is this: the Stasi did not invent gaslighting. They simply formalized it. They bureaucratized it. They turned it into a documented, institutionally approved methodology with training manuals and success metrics. The clinical literature notes that gaslighting works because it targets something more foundational than memory. It targets the mechanism by which you decide what is real. Once a person begins to doubt their own perception, they become dependent on the person or system doing the doubting. That dependency is the goal, not compliance through fear, but compliance through confusion. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because the Stasi did not need to exist for this principle to function at scale, they just had to find it first. Consider what a gaslighter actually needs to be effective. Not strength, not intelligence. 3 things. Access to the target's perception of reality, a power differential, and time. In personal relationships, that access is intimate. The partner, the parent, the employer who watches you every day. But what happens when the access is not intimate, when it is ambient? When it reaches you through a screen, through every news feed, through every platform calibrated to keep you uncertain about what is true. In 2008, a researcher named Bryant Welch published a book arguing that political gaslighting did not begin with any one figure or party. His argument was more disturbing than that. He wrote that it emerged from the collision of modern communications, marketing techniques, and long-standing methods of propaganda. That these tools were, in his words, simply waiting to be discovered by those with sufficient ambition and psychological makeup to use them. Ask yourself this: if gaslighting is most effective when the target is isolated, dependent, and uncertain about reality, then what is the psychological effect of an information environment specifically designed to maximize uncertainty? The University of Palermo study identified something that rarely appears in popular discussions. The personality trait most strongly associated with the intimidator type of gaslighter was not aggression. It was distractibility, the inability to maintain goal-focused behavior. The suddenness of their attacks, unpredictable, then absent, then sudden again, is not chaos. It is the mechanism. Unpredictability itself is the weapon, because the target spends their cognitive resources trying to predict the next attack, rather than evaluating whether the reality being presented to them is accurate. Stay with me, because what comes next is the part that nobody talks about. There is a version of gaslighting that requires no gaslighter at all. Researchers have begun documenting what one source calls self-gaslighting, the process by which a person who has been gaslighted begins to internalize the gaslighter's narrative so completely that they continue the erosion themselves. The external voice becomes internal. The abuser no longer needs to be present. The world was told gaslighting is something that happens to people in bad relationships. The reality is that gaslighting is a transferable technology, and its effectiveness has nothing to do with love, intimacy, or personal malice. It has to do with the structure of human cognition itself. Human beings are not built to verify reality independently. We are built to verify it socially, through other people, through consensus, through trusted sources. This is not a flaw. It is the feature that made civilization possible, but it is also the exact vulnerability that gaslighting exploits. When a gaslighter tells you that what you perceived did not happen, they are not arguing with your memory. They are repositioning themselves as a more reliable source of reality than your own experience. And because we are social verifiers by nature, some part of us finds that plausible. Especially when the gaslighter holds power, especially when we have been trained across years to trust them more than ourselves. This is why the term exploded in 2022, not because gaslighting became more common, but because for the first time in history, large numbers of people were simultaneously experiencing a reality in which official narratives and observable experience were dramatically diverging, in politics, in public health, in institutions. And a word that had previously lived in the literature of domestic abuse suddenly became the only word that fit. For decades, this pattern was studied in small rooms between two people, documented in clinical case files that almost no one read. Not by accident, by the logic of who gets to define what is real. This is not history. Look at what is happening right now. The same personality traits that researchers identified in gaslighting abusers, intimacy avoidance, manipulativeness, strategic unpredictability, are the traits that social scientists are beginning to map in algorithmic content systems designed to maximize engagement through emotional destabilization. Most people will never connect these dots. Now you can. What the research tells us is that the antidote to gaslighting, at every scale, is the same. It is the capacity to trust your own perception. Not arrogance, not certainty, simply the practice of treating your own experience as evidence. The gaslighter, whether a person or a system, requires one thing above all: that you keep returning to them to find out what is real. The moment you stop, the mechanism fails. In 1944, a woman in a Victorian mansion looked up and watched the gaslights flicker. She knew something was wrong. She had always known. She simply needed someone to stop telling her she didn't. If this story gave you a frame for something you have been trying to name, help us find the next one. Every time you share or leave a comment, it tells us this kind of work is worth doing. Next time, we go deeper into something just as hidden and far older. A pattern of control that psychologists have tracked across every culture and every century. The truth is stranger than the name suggests.